Hello. Today I want to share a deeply personal project that bridges the gap between abstract developmental theory and the messy reality of everyday life. As an educator, I spend my days thinking about how children learn and grow. But as a parent, I am often reminded that knowing theory in your head is very different from practicing it at home. My presentation is broken into two distinct parts. First, a child-focused behavioral intervention rooted in early childhood development, and second, a self-focused look at adult behavior modification. And with my 6-year-old son, and our journey to help him overcome a stubborn habit, thumb sucking, examined through Erickson's lens of industry versus inferiority. This is my kiddo. He's 6 years old, full of energy and absolute joy. And as you can see from the photo, he absolutely loves baseball. According to Erickson's stages of psychosocial development, he is firmly situated in the industry versus inferiority stage. In a child's life, their core developmental task is to gain a sense of competence and mastery over their environment. When a child succeeds in mastering new skills, whether that's riding a bike, reading their first words, or hitting a baseball, they build a deep foundational self-confidence. However, if they repeatedly experience failure or lack the tools to succeed, it breeds a pervasive sense of self-doubt and inferiority. Understanding this stage was crucial because it entirely flipped how I viewed his struggle with thumb sucking. Why does the 6-year-old continue to suck his thumb? We have to look at 3 developmental factors. First, there's a fundamental emotional need. From infancy, sucking is a powerful, involuntary neurological tool for calming down. It reduces cortisol and self-soothes. For my son, it was his automatic response to stress, transitions, or tiredness. Second, at age 6, peer comparison begins to rear its head. As Lally and Valentine French noted in their 2019 research, school-age children constantly measure themselves against their peers. My son was beginning to realize that this was a habit for quote-unquote babies, which introduces some social anxiety. Finally, agency matters. Miller, in his 2016 text on developmental theories, emphasizes that a child's self-image relies heavily on mastering their own skills. When adults step in with heavy-handed control, it strips the child of agency and can accidentally trigger that exact sense of inferiority we want to avoid. Every time I told him, take your thumb out of your mouth or stop it, I was reinforcing his lack of control. Parents, I tried the quick fixes first. I bought the bitter nail polish, a chemical deterrent designed to shock him out of the habit. It didn't work. All it did was make him cry and get upset with me. Our past attempts were entirely adult-driven, centered around punishments and external pressure. This created power struggles. If I wanted to support his sense of industry, I had to completely shift him from being a passive subject to becoming the active owner of his own behavior. From an adult-driven model to a child-led model characterized by visual tracking and collaborative rewards. We needed a plan that honored his agency, and because he is obsessed with baseball, we built the baseball retirement plan. Your attention to this slide, which shows the actual chart we used. Together, using Gemini AI to help generate the theme, we designed the thumb-sucking retirement summer training camp. The language here is incredibly intentional. We didn't call it the Stop Sucking Your Thumb chart. We framed it as training in retirement. Just like an aging baseball player retires their jersey when they've completed their work, he was going to help his thumb retire from its job of self-soothing. The chart layout features home plate to home run tracker lanes. For every thumb-free day, he got to physically color in a baseball. Look closely at the bottom right. You'll see his signature under an official thumb retirement oath. He signed it as the player, and I signed it as the coach. Right there, the power dynamic shifted from mother versus child to a team working together toward mastery. The mechanics were highly structured to build a clear cause and effect relationship. Every block of 7 baseballs colored in equaled a reward cycle. Critically, these were collaborative rewards, things he chose. He selected family game night, a special ice cream trip, and a small prize, just to name a few. The chart is just paper. We also had to manage his environmental triggers. During the daytime, typically when he was zoning out watching TV, the thumb would creep in. Instead of yelling, I used gentle, neutral verbal cues, just a quiet reminder. We established a rule. Slip-ups don't erase the day's progress. If he caught himself, the day was still a win. At bedtime, which is the hardest time for any thumbsucker, we maintained a calm boundary combined with a reminder of his retirement plan. We actively replaced the thumb with alternative tactile comfort tools, ensuring he had his favorite blanket and a stuffed animal to hold on to. Every intervention needed a catalyst, and nature gave us the perfect one. He got his very first loose tooth. We sat down and looked at the anatomy of his mouth. I explained that his forever teeth were waiting underneath, and they needed protection from the pressure of his thumb. This gave him a biological why to match his behavioral why. Results after 3 weeks were astonishing. 3 weeks in, the consistent routine was firmly maintained. His daytime habit entirely eliminated. He successfully completed multiple 7 baseball cycles to earn his rewards. But the biggest metric wasn't something you can count. The tears, power struggles, and resistance completely disappeared the moment he took ownership of the process. Erickson was exactly right. Children don't want mere compliance. They want mastery. When we structured the environment to let him achieve that mastery, the habit fell away naturally. And bonus, that loose tooth fell out. Now let's pivot. It is easy as parents and teachers to look at children's behaviors and design interventions for them. It's much harder to turn that analytical mirror onto ourselves. Part 2 of this presentation is a theory-informed approach to helping myself put the phone down, break my own compulsive habit, and be genuinely more present in my own life. Just as my son used his thumb to soothe his 6-year-old brain, I realized I was using social media to soothe my adult brain. Let's look at the developmental framework of middle adulthood to understand why. To show you where I am in my own development, physically, I have the steady health and stamina required to teach full-time and parent a 6-year-old. Cognitively, I'm arguably at a professional peak. I have 21 years of wisdom in education, problem-solving skills, and specialized knowledge. Psychosocially, my life is deeply centered around core relationships as a wife, a mother, and a dedicated friend. We look at Erickson's life cycles. I'm in the stage of generativity versus stagnation. Lally and Valentine French define generativity as looking beyond oneself to the continuation of one's life through others. My whole day is an act of generativity, pouring into my students and pouring into my family. From a cognitive standpoint, adults operate in what Piaget scholars call post-formal thought. This is the advanced stage beyond formal operations where we develop the capacity to handle life's messy, conflicting, and emotionally nuanced gray areas. We know life isn't black and white, but constantly processing these gray areas comes at a steep neurological cost. Brings us to the core issue, hypergenerativity. Because I am deeply invested in my career and my family, my brain is in overdrive. What I have learned is scrolling is a way to just kind of shut down my brain. Nobody expects anything from me on a screen. I can just, not pay attention and just scroll. And that is something that's not laziness. It's an attempt to kind of just shut down, turn off my brain, and not have anything expected of me in that moment. Science behind the scroll as shown in this graphic. So step 1. On any given day, an elementary teacher makes upwards of 1,500 decisions. Where should the student sit? How do I rephrase this learning target? How do I de-escalate this conflict? What should I say to that parent in an email? Then I come home and I make 100 more decisions as a parent myself. Step 2. By 6:00 p.m., my cognitive control centers are completely and utterly bankrupt. This is what psychologist Roy Baumeister calls ego depletion, the scientific reality that willpower is a finite energy source. Step 3. When demands swamp your self-regulation, executive functioning suffers. Your exhausted brain forces itself into a low-power mode. It looks for an activity that requires exactly 0 decisions, where a pre-programmed algorithm does 100% of the heavy lifting. Suddenly, the pieces connect. My evening social media scrolling wasn't a character flaw, and it wasn't laziness. It was a predictable developmental response to profound mental exhaustion. Knowing that willpower alone would fail me at 7:00, I had to build environmental barriers, much like I did for the thumb sucking with my son. I set up a behavioral modification matrix based on high and low self-control and high and low social value. I implemented 4 rules. 1. The no scroll after 7 p.m. rule. Family comes first. The phone is physically in my room charging. Number 2. Evening rituals. Replacing the screen with alternative cognitive behaviors, like playing board games with my family or watching a movie together or reading a book, which is something I really enjoy. Number 3, the swipe rule. If I do open an app during a allowed window or a period of time, I'm limiting myself to 5 or fewer swipes. Then I must close it. This prevents the dopamine-driven endless scroll loop. And number 4 is accountability. I used a physical calendar tracker where I placed a check or an X daily to visually monitor my progress. My data carefully over a month, and what the data revealed was highly illustrative of human behavior. Peak occurred during week 3, where I achieved a 6 out of 7 day success rate. Why? Because we were on a family beach trip. I was completely removed from my normal exhaustion triggers. My mental tank was full, so choosing presence over screens was easy. However, if you look at week 4, we returned home, stepped back into the daily grind, and I saw a dip. My mental tank hit 0 midweek, and my deeply embedded habit immediately resurfaced itself. But here's the big win. Before this intervention, I had 0 conscious control over this behavior. By implementing these barriers, I maintained a consistent 50% or greater success rate even during stressful weeks. This is massive. It's tangible progress. Moving forward into the school year, my goal is to try and sustain 5 out of 7 days each week, using habit substitution and afternoon walks with my son. The quote from Miller's 2016 text that guided this entire project. A strong developmental theory serves a vital function because it organizes and gives meaning to facts that might otherwise appear disconnected. Before looking through these theoretical lenses, thumb sucking and phone scrolling look like 2 completely disconnected, annoying habits. But theory organized these facts into profound insights. It taught us that my son's struggle was an unspoken bid for mastery and independence, and my scrolling was a neurological response to cognitive depletion, not a character flaw. For both the 6-year-old and the adult, what worked wasn't shame, punishments, or empty willpower. It was tactical adjustments and thoughtful environmental barriers. Through this process, these abstract academic frameworks stepped off the pages of my textbooks and became tangible, life-changing realities in our daily home life. We all have our own version of the thumb or the scroll that we rely on. So I challenge each of you to step up to home plate Audit your daily habits and design the boundaries you need to make real and lasting changes. Thank you so much for following along on this presentation, and I hope that it will help somebody.